Lately, I've been interested in how game developers design ambient system and how those choices help bring game world to life in a way that feels more natural and immersive. Every game approaches it differently, using unique techniques to pull player into the environment, but often when we're playing, we become so focused on the action that we barely notice the ambient work happening around us. It simply blends into the world without demanding attention. However, in games like first-person shooters where subtle audio cues are crucial for survival, or horror games where every creak and whisper matters, ambient sounds takes on a much more critical role. That got me interested and I wanted to try building an ambient system myself using UE5 and Wwise to better understand how all these pieces come together. For this demonstration, I'm using Wwise 2024.1 along with Unreal Spatial audio system, mainly focusing on acoustic simulation and volume-based ambient design. One of my main challenges for this project was that the map contains several rooms, each needing different acoustic treatments, I wanted to ensure that as player moves around the environment, they can feel the differences in space, whether through unique ambient actors or time-based acoustic effects. In this case, these transitions are relatively straightforward. Moving directly from one volume to another, only minor adjustments were needed. However, as I continued working, I built a more detailed room model using Unreal brush and modeling tools. I quickly learned that when multiple rooms intersect closely, things can become much harder to manage if the setup isn't handled carefully. For example, when the player moves from the ground level into the underground, two major factors needed attention. First, managing the transition between the two volumes, and the second, making sure players could perceive the depth and distance between spaces by interacting with the environment. Here's the setup for the outdoor and the underground volumes. To handle the transition, I tweaked the surface property and used the reverb zone for the underground area. All surfaces were treated as portals, so I adjusted the transition width, which effectively act like portal depth to smooth the handoff between spaces. By setting up the underground volume this way, transition felt more natural, but I wanted to take it a step further to increase immersion. So I added additional reverb zones specifically for the well located between the ground level and underground. I assigned the underground volume as its parent room and used the same reverb settings. Now, even while standing above the well, players can pick up the subtle acoustic information about the underground space below them. The same concept applies in reverse. When players are underground and looking up towards the ground level, they can still hear ambient information coming from outside. But for this effect, I placed an AK ambient actor inside the well reverb zone and fine-tuned the attenuation setting in Wwise to match the experience I wanted. This abandoned and hollow looking area was another interesting design to work with. I wanted to feel somewhat open air yet still retain a sense of shelter, just like a blend of outdoor and indoor characteristics. To achieve this, I extended the reverb zone from the underground area, gave it a higher room priority than the outdoor volume, and lastly connected child volumes through portals. I also posted a different AK audio event for this space and added AK ambient actor just above this area. And by assigning the aux with subtle reverb in Wwise, I could give this hollow structure a more realistic presence. When players are moving through large open areas, it is relatively easy for them to notice environmental transition, whether through shift in visuals or changes in ambient sounds. But with a more complex environment like this destroyed two-level building connected by a staircase, the transition becomes more subtle. The geometry and broken structure require extra attention to make sure a player could perceive the shift in space. So I created 2 separate reverb zones, one for the lower level and one for the upper level, each with distinct surface property to capture differences in sound propagation between indoor and outdoor sections. I also added portals both at the doorways and at large open surfaces, which help making the transition smoothly. Through this project, I learned that ambient systems are much more than just simply layering sounds together. They're about shaping the player's sense of space, movement, and atmosphere in subtle ways. By carefully designing room transition, acoustic treatments, and layering environmental sounds, it's possible to create a world that feels not just believable, but truly alive.